Hello and welcome to the D1Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Patrick Rooney, the Week 13 preview. Want to let you know that it's time to prepare for takeoff because Academy Sports and Outdoors is your new home for Jordan Brand. Swag up today and take flight on the court, off the court, and above the court. Making plays in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear is fun for the whole family. Jordan collection is available in-store and at academy.com. Elevated styles and shoes for everyone. Unstoppable value every day. Unleash your greatness with the Jordan collection at Academy Sports and Outdoors. You may have noticed, if you're a faithful listener, that I did not mention how many minutes of heaven you're going to get because it's a little different tonight. I am joined only by the great Joe Healy, Josephus, Sauce, if you will, which means infinite minutes of heaven. We call the D1Baseball Podcast. It's,
Buckle up,
your
folks.
bucket will be full.
Yeah. Strap in and get comfortable. This could go any number of directions. It's like the show with just you and I, Runes, is like a box of old fireworks. You might light it
Yes.
and it just creates this beautiful tapestry in the sky. It also might tip over and start firing at people in the driveway, and you just don't know. You're just rolling the dice.
Everyone stay in an athletic position, feet shoulder width apart. That's the only choice that you have.
Yep.
All right. So, Joe, a couple things that are top of mind before we get into this series. So it has taken me weeks and weeks and weeks to figure out these new conference tournament formats. I'm in favor of them. And when I say new, I'm talking about the ACC and the SEC. I'm in favor of these. And I love that what I knew right away was that every game's an elimination game. I love that. But the buys and the double buys have me a little twisted up. And the question that kept coming up was, if your team's 9 through 16, how many games do you have to win the tournament? I am 99.9% sure that I have the answer, and the answer is 5. Do you concur? Is that accurate?
Well, okay, so let's say you're 9 through 16, so you win that first round, then you get folded into the top 8. So then you've got 12, so that's 2, 8, 4. Yeah. 5 games.
That's right.
That probably me thinking it out loud did not make sense to the listener there, but trust me, that I was doing the math in my head. But yes. 5.
Yeah, and I think what happens is you have to win on Tuesday to get yourself to Wednesday. You win on Wednesday to get to Thursday, and now there are 8 teams left in the tournament. And any 8-team tournament takes 3 games to win when it's single loss elimination. So 2 games get you out of those bye situations, and then you're just one of 8 teams trying to win 3 games to win it all.
Yeah, it's a little like, it feels like a college basketball format. I think this is as these college basketball tournaments have gotten big too, because it's not just baseball that's gotten big in terms of conferences. And so, leagues like SEC, ACC, Big Ten, and college basketball do a similar kind of thing.
Yep. So I'm very proud of myself for having finally. It only took 3 weeks for me to get that. Yes,
that's
only 3 weeks.
You got there.
Here's my other personal foible that I was going to share with you is that I do this every year. And in 2025, I was remarkably calm and in this area. And I am one of the sickos that I listen to the Nerdcast twice every week. Because it's just the first time is just too much. It helps, but I couldn't, I need to listen to it again. And what I do is I have a team that I'm worried about not making the NCAA tournament. And I get emotionally attached. I get all wrapped up. And I think you know who my team is this year.
I do.
It's the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Yeah.
And I'm already, it's so funny. I do this in marriage too. I have the conversation with Jenny before she gets the chance to participate. And it's really not a good play in marriage, by the way. 20 years in, I've improved in this area. But I'm already convincing myself that Iowa's not getting in. And so it really is bothering me. And so I thought I was going to do better this year. 2 years ago was Irvine. I feel like every year this happens to me. So I just wanted to say that out loud, Joe. It feels therapeutic to say it out loud. But I'm shopping in the store. I had to go grocery shopping today. It's possible that I didn't get anything on Jenny's list correct because I was swirling about Iowa's postseason resume.
So you probably worried about it more than Rick Heller is, perhaps. Yeah, but the thing about it is for Iowa, so I listened to the Nerdcast too. I heard the discussion. I also was party to the discussion that was happening yesterday in our internal chats here at D1. They've still got that neutral series which is against Oregon State this weekend, which of course is like a master stroke by Rick Heller. to get, I don't know how the negotiation went down on that deal, but to get a neutral site, to get it classified as a neutral site games against Oregon State in Des Moines is quite the masterstroke, because obviously that helps the RPI if Iowa gets at least a game there. And then they've got Oregon to finish it off, and, that they could still win the Big Ten. And so I imagine, yes, their resume is weird. And it could go either way. It does feel like a little bit of a coin flip, but they've still got plenty of opportunity in front of them to make a statement. So I'm not as dismissive, I guess, as some could possibly be about the fact that, the RPI is just not good enough, or, they didn't play a couple of the toughest teams in the Big Ten. Like, I just still think the biggest opportunities are still in front of them. Like, would it have been good not to lose the series to Washington last week? Sure.
Yes.
But, but they still have their biggest opportunities in front of them. So we'll see. But I share that, though. Like, because I understand, like, I get frustrated too that you can have a great year and then you get told, here are these, let's just call it 6 or 8 games, and your entire season comes down to these 6 or 8 games. And if that were true in the SEC, and I get the differences, and I cover the SEC, nobody has to tell me. Right. But if it came down to 6 or 8 games for A&M, they'd have been, their season been over a long time ago, Yep. But it's not. They've had time to right the ship, and they're not alone. Florida's same way. So anyway, I share maybe not quite your preoccupation with it, but I do share your concern that they could have a really great year and be a really talented team, and just because they didn't play well on the 3 weekends that were most important for them to play well, they could get left out. And that's a bummer.
Yeah. Joe, in this offseason, you and I are going to do a podcast, and this podcast is going to be a mediation. It's going to be a marriage counseling situation. I want you to picture the scene from Wedding Crashers with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson with the gal calls the guy a hillbilly and the whole deal. Because I feel like, and Iowa is going to be a great example of this, I feel like college baseball needs to take a step towards the Big Ten in baseball. And I think that the Big Ten needs to take a step towards baseball, college baseball. And I think both parties feel a little dug in for me. So again, like let's put that on our calendars for July, a mediation. You and I will preside between college baseball and the Big Ten. We need these two groups to come together.
Love it. And that to some listeners may sound like a joke. And of course, Runes and I will have fun with that. But I do think there's a good point in there where it's like, look, now that UCLA and Oregon in particular are in that league, and USC's improving, Washington's pretty good this year, like all that, like it is good. They're going to either have to take baseball more seriously, or you're going to have those West Coast teams really bemoaning the fact that they're stuck, quote unquote, stuck in that league.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think, and this is me being really paranoid, I think that the SEC has taken, they like our sport has grown exponentially in the last 25 years, and the SEC deserves probably 90% of the credit for that. But I'm worried that the SEC has helped us grow as far as we can go. Like if the enterprise is going to grow, we're going to have to grow in some other areas. And with the Big Ten being, major league areas, there are major league teams in these areas. So that clearly people love baseball, and it's the second most powerful conference in college sports right now. I think that's not, disputable. We have to improve our relationship.
Agreed. Yeah, I think I totally agree there. And, it's really easy to go to the obvious solution of moving the season back, but to me, that's lazy. Like, would it be nice ultimately? Sure, of course. But there are other potential solutions or ways to go about this. It isn't just, and I feel like that's where the Big Ten has erred before. And I'm not saying I'm smarter than anybody else who's ever tried to make things work this way, but it does feel like that has been kind of the particular preoccupation of Big Ten coaches, is we got to move the season back. And then the conversation just kind of ends there once the logistics for that don't work out. And I think it's time for us to kind of move on to other points of interest in that conversation.
Yeah. Like I agree. I think you've said it beautifully there. Like, I feel like the Big Ten coaches who, like, again, it's a phenomenal coaching group. That's one of my frustrations, is I think the Big Ten has just an outstanding group of coaches, but I do feel like I agree with you. They've picked just the one hill to die on. And I actually think the answer is not one hill where we do battle. It's like a 5-point plan. It's like
Yep.
there's 5 different adjustments we make where everybody wins. So anyway, there we go. Good therapy for Coach Rooney there. Appreciate it, Dr. Healy. Joe, so you can help me with one other thing where I can do some self-improvement. In hockey, after a game, they have like a 3 stars system, right? Like the players of the game. Who's the best player? Is it the first star, the second star, or the third star, or first star is the best player?
Yep.
Okay.
But they announce it in reverse, so they do third star, second star, first star in that order.
All right, we're gonna do that. So I'm gonna kind of group some of the series for week 13, and then I'm gonna have you pick your third star, then your second star, then your first star. So group 1 will be the SEC, and so let me read off the series for everybody. We've got Ole Miss at Mississippi State. So Ole Miss, the Egg Bowl, if you will. Ole Miss at going to the dude at Mississippi State. We've got Vandy at Tennessee. We've got Oklahoma at Kentucky. We've got South Carolina at Auburn. We've got Mizzou at A&M. We've got Georgia at Alabama. We've got Arkansas at LSU. And we've got the Gators at Texas. And fix if I misappropriated who's home and away for any of those. Who is your third star SEC series for the week, Joe?
Boy, I like this game, Runes. It is hockey playoff season after all, which is one of my favorite times of year just because hockey playoffs is like a roller coaster ride.
Can't beat it.
Sadly, St. Louis Blues eliminated Game 7 against the Winnipeg Jets. Tough. It was a real tough scene, Runes.
Tough. Smallest barn in the NHL, Winnipeg. Mike Monaco, the great and handsome Mike Monaco would say.
That's right. Yeah, they scored a game-tying goal with 2 seconds left, but not that I'm still bothered by it. Anyway, in Game 7, no less. Okay, so my third star is going to be the Egg Bowl. Ole Miss and Mississippi State. There's just a lot on this series in a way that I don't necessarily think I anticipated there being. I kind of thought it might be a little like the last couple of years where one team is good or maybe one's not, and it just the stakes aren't there. But you've got a situation where, Ole Miss probably feels like it's in a situation where, hey, if we go to Starkville and we get a result here, if we can win this series or really get greedy with it, we're right back in that hosting conversation. Mm-hmm. And similarly, though, Mississippi State feels like almost like it has some found money in the fact that it has Mizzou next weekend, and is as uncomfortable as it is to bank on, sweeping a series against a team. Like, I get it when Mizzou is 0-24 that you feel like you're pretty confident in being able to do that in that series, but Mississippi State can more or less lock this thing up in terms of getting back into the postseason by winning this series, because then they'd only feel like they need to go get, one or win the series against Mizzou. So I think there's also something to the fact that these two teams, even when Mississippi State was at its nadir and Ole Miss was in the top 10, at some point earlier this season, I've always felt like these teams weren't that far apart. And It feels like they've kind of met in the middle here. And so it wouldn't shock me if State gets the result here and those teams both end up, kind of being in a similar place. So that is my third star. And of course the atmosphere there is going to make it, just bonkers on top of everything else. Yeah.
Mississippi State's fascinating to me because, I was just there and, the dude is just the dude. It's just, for those of us that love college baseball, it's like going to the Vatican, right? It's like 14,000 people that love the sport, and it's the atmosphere is, it reminds me of Omaha, where you can walk 360 degrees and just everything about the dude is amazing. Their team is so interesting, Mississippi State. Like they can really slug. I like the lineup. They are the hottest of messes defensively. Like literally everybody is playing out of position. And, with the exception of maybe Joe Powell, but like Joe Powell is not in a perfect world the guy who's catching every single pitch, right? Like you're platooning him or something. But, the good thing about Mississippi State is they're just cool with it. Like they've just kind of gotten okay with who they are defensively. Pico Khan is a real ace. The rest of the rotation is, Evan Sierra is just, like trying to stay, 100 feet ahead of the law. God bless him. Like he's just, he's just pitching on pure guile. And then their bullpen has got like tremendous stuff. I think for Mississippi State, this series is really important because, and this is going to come off a little pejorative, Joe, so I apologize in advance, but if you're Mississippi State, you don't want the committee looking too closely at your resume. You don't. I'm telling you, you don't, because if they sweep Mizzou and they just win one game this weekend, that gets them to 14 wins, and I actually don't think people will look that closely at it. Their RPI is excellent. But if they lose this series and then lose a game to Mizzou and they end up at 13-17, I think it could get really dicey, because, if you look at their record in the SEC, then it's going to be 7-2 against teams 14, 15, and 16, and it's going to be 6-15 against the rest of the league. And I know, you're aware of this, but man, Mississippi State caught some serious breaks in the schedule. Like, they didn't have to play Tennessee. They didn't have to play Georgia. Didn't have to play A&M. Didn't have to play Arkansas. Didn't have to play Vandy. Like, 4 of those teams could end up in Omaha. Like, right? It's like, yep. So I think if you're Mississippi State, this weekend is critical. If you win this series, you're probably in great shape, because even if Mizzou beats you once, I don't know. It just feels like 14 wins is so important for Mississippi State to me.
Yeah, I would agree. We talked about this as a group a little bit in our internal chats earlier this week about how the SEC is so different than any other, even power conference in college baseball, because 13 wins is taken as, to the point you made, taken as gospel. And right. Really, if you talk to the Nerdmaster General Mark about this, like, that really hasn't been the case for that long. 13 wins used to be kind of like a coin flip situation that you probably are going to end up on the wrong side of more often than not. Now it's become just kind of the accepted number. Part of that is because there's so much RPI insulation. If you win 13 SEC games, unless you just had a weird season where you were terrible in non-conference, that's going to be good enough to get your RPI where it needs to go. So it's just it's kind of and that's not a criticism. That's just reality. You get to math, and then 14 is like, well, yeah, what are we even talking about? You're in.
Yeah.
But I will say, I am also intrigued along with you. And I wonder if there's a situation too, because Mississippi State just coming off of sweeping Kentucky, and look, they got Oklahoma this weekend, and I'm scrolling ahead to see who they have the final weekend. I know, they got Vanderbilt on the road the last weekend of the season. And like, we've been talking a lot about 14 teams, but like, I don't think this is going to happen. Let me be clear and say it another time. I do not think this is going to happen, but there is a non-zero chance it's just 12, because like, if Kentucky loses their last 2 series, which is totally on the table, right?
Yeah.
Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, they're 12-18, and then they got work to do in Hoover. And Mississippi State, if they get swept by Ole Miss, which I think is unlikely, but on the table, even if they sweep Mizzou, they'll be sitting on 13 and probably don't feel 100% comfortable, to your point, because then you'll have 3 teams out of the field, and those account for a large percentage of their wins in conference. So anyway, I'm with you that the resume is a little bit light, but it is, 14 wins is kind of going to be a magic number for them.
Yeah, and you win this series, and you just added a major bullet point to your resume. And I think Ole Miss is a fun team. Like, I haven't asked Mike Bianco or his staff about this, but Ole Miss, if I put my coach hat on, this feels like a team that would be really fun to coach. Like, just tough, competitive. Like, they never quit on you. It's. I don't think it's a glorious roster by SEC standards, but I think they're up for anything. Ole Miss. I think they give you everything they've got every week, so this will be fun. Who is your second star, Coach Healy?
Let's see here. Let me look at the menu one more time. I'm going to go Vanderbilt and Tennessee. Vanderbilt at Tennessee, a series that, frankly, I didn't think was going to be that interesting probably 6 weeks ago. It was around the time Tennessee was number 1, and we thought, okay, here goes Tennessee off like a rocket ship for the, 4th time in 5 years, or, whatever. And it just didn't. It obviously hasn't happened like that. And now you're looking at a situation where, suddenly, Vanderbilt's offense is not a great offense, but it's been good enough and trending in the right direction in some cases. The rotation is kind of quietly one of the better ones in the league. J.D. Thompson and Connor Fennell in particular have been excellent. Cody Bowker's had his moments, maybe not as consistent, but has had his moments. And And Tennessee has been fading. Lost 4 of the last 5 series. I've been asked a lot about what the issue is there, and I think it's a bunch of different things. Just bullpen's not as deep, lineup's not as scary. I think there's also something to the fact that I think it's easy to underestimate. Yes, guys like Christian Moore and Blake Burke, etc., were really good players. They were also centerpieces from a locker room standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
This year's team is a lot of guys who took back seats to those guys in terms of leadership roles, and also a lot of guys who are just going to be there for probably 1 year. And I'm not saying those guys are bad guys, but it's hard to kind of recreate national title chemistry when that's your roster makeup. So I think it's a lot of different things, but suddenly, like I said, I feel totally differently about Vanderbilt than I did 4 to 6 weeks ago. And the same is true as Tennessee, but just in different directions.
Yep. I have this impression, Joe, that, like Vandy, to me, I mean, not to me, to everyone, like they're the program of the decade. It's either them or Florida is the program of the decade in the 2010s, right? Like, this is going to sound like me taking a little bit of a pot shot at Vandy. I mean, I know I speak for myself, but everyone who cares about college baseball, like if you don't respect that program, I don't know what program you respect, right? Like they've got 2 national titles, et cetera, et cetera. I do feel like Tennessee kind of has bullied them the last couple years. And maybe I'm not going back and looking at scores or anything like that. That's just my impression. Tennessee's clearly been the better program over the last 4 years. I know I can say that because they've been the best program in the country for the last 4 years, Tennessee. But I do think I'm just curious to see if this Vandy team, like, do they take some punches? Do they take some shots at Tennessee this weekend? Because I feel like Tennessee's not quite as swaggy as they've been either. And, as the Nerdmaster General said as Mark Etheridge said on the Nerdcast, like, surely you alluded to it, surely Tennessee's not going to lose 4 home series out of 5. Like, surely that's not possible, right? That's one of the most vicious place to play in the league.
Yeah, I've compared it to, like, it's as close as we have in college baseball to an atmosphere that mimics like South American soccer matches.
Yeah,
where there's just like fans like gripping the nets and shaking them, and and very, very hostile, which I say is a compliment. It just hasn't been that this year. There's like a palpable, I would say too. Somebody made this observation to me. Someone who, I'll just say, a team that won a series in Knoxville this season told me that someone with one of those programs, it just feels like there's an unease in Lindsey Nelson this season. Like, it doesn't feel quite, to your point, it's not the cauldron that it has been, and there's like almost like a nervousness, and but you do wonder if there is a little bit of something of an emotional breaking point. And I mean this in a good way for Tennessee last weekend, because like Tony V had just had enough at the end of last weekend, and it was directed at the umpires, but you and I both know it really wasn't about the umpires, probably. Yeah. But he got his money worth on that chair, I'll tell you that much. But but you do wonder if that's like the kind of thing that just kind of, I don't know, like turns the ship around for a weird reason, because that's just kind of how baseball works sometimes.
Yeah. And I would say for Tennessee, and then we'll go to your first star, like, hey, their bullpen has struggled and they haven't played very good infield defense. And those are 2 things that kind of hurt you at your core as a team. I think like I think those 2 things infect your confidence as much as anything, because an infield error is just so like glaring, right? It's like it happens right in front of everybody, and it gives the other team a 4th out. And bullpen struggles make every game feel like your last gasp. Like you're just waiting. You're relieved when you win instead of joyous when you win. So yeah, it's fascinating. Your first star, Coach Healy.
Yeah, it's the obvious one. Arkansas going to Baton Rouge to take on LSU. A series, like, honestly, like, we have LSU ranked 3rd. We have Arkansas ranked 7. I think if I had my druthers, I'd probably have those reversed, essentially. Yeah. I just still think they're both very good teams. I just like Arkansas's balance a little bit more. Obviously, a big breakout last weekend for Arkansas to come out the way they did against Texas. And Mark and I on Highway to Hoover, we've both kind of been pretty steadfast in, Arkansas's best is better than anyone else's best when they're really cooking. And it feels like, at least last weekend, they were cooking. And one little subplot for me in this one is, I think a big part of what happened last weekend for LSU against A&M was that they're really having a hard time with left-handed pitching. And A&M for however it happened has like nothing but left-handers on their pitching.
Right.
Arkansas is not quite that way, especially once you get to the bullpen, but they're going to see a really good one in Zach Root right out of the chute. And then even though it's TBA on Sunday, I'm going to guess that's Landon Beidelshees, who is also a left-handed pitcher and not as good as Zach Root, but still a guy who can really shut you down if he's on. So LSU's either going to figure out hitting left-handers in this series, or they're going to lose this series. Like, it feels like that's oversimplifying, of course, but it feels like those are two of the more obvious options. There is they either continue to struggle against left-handed pitching, and that's kind of an undoing, or they perform better in that regard this weekend, and that's what helps propel them to a series win.
Yep. I feel like my relationship with Arkansas is like this. I fell in love. We were in love. We had a very tough breakup. Now we're back together and it's going well, but like, it's only, we just got back together. Right. And so like, I'm looking for assurances, Joe, that we're good here, because if I'm doing the math right, Arkansas ripped out of the 11-1 to start league play. And then they lose the 3 straight series. And then you start looking back and you're like, oh my gosh, that 11-1 was 6 wins against South Carolina, Mizzou. And, then they were so impressive last weekend. So I'm looking for Arkansas to show me that I can move a toothbrush in or whatever happens.
You made a smart decision to get back together.
That's
like basically
right.
Your friends are like, are you good? Are you sure you're good? Are you sure this is different?
Right. Oh gosh, so great. So anyway, yeah, that one will be fascinating. Hey, let's take a quick break. I want to talk about boots, and then we'll pair some of the other big leagues together. So let us talk about Tecovas boots. If you love our game, you know that smell. It's the one that brings you right back. Fresh cut grass, a broken-in glove made with real leather. That's exactly what you get with Tecovas boots. They're made for baseball people, whether you've been wearing boots your whole life or picking up your first pair. With over 200 steps of craftsmanship, they're built to last. They feel great right out of the box, and they look even better. Anywhere worth going is worth going in good boots. Find your pair today at Tecovas. So, well done. Look at me pumping myself up. Well done. Positive self-talk.
Only you can really be there for you, Runes.
That's right. I just gave myself my Mookie Betts impersonation right there. I love that. All right, so Joe, same hockey principles. So the ACC series that I circled to put on the menu for you are Duke at Clemson, NC State at UNC. By the way, UNC kind of handled NC State tonight. I think the final was 7-1. Louisville at Georgia Tech, Miami at Virginia. So Duke at Clemson, State at UNC, Louisville at Georgia Tech, Miami at Virginia. In the Big 12, I'll throw these 3 on the menu: West Virginia at Kansas State, Cincinnati at TCU, Oklahoma State at Baylor. And then in the Big 10, I'll throw these on the menu: Oregon State at Iowa, which is kind of sort of a Big 10 series, Washington at Oregon, UCLA at Illinois. And I'm mostly putting that in there because UCLA is the biggest threat to Iowa not winning the regular season title in the Big 10.
So it feels, given how we started this show, Runes, it feels like I'd be remiss if I didn't go ahead and give us an opportunity to talk about Oregon State and Iowa. Mm-hmm. And generally, that's also a fascinating series. So we'll go the third star on that one. And I think I'll let you kind of handle maybe the Iowa piece of it, but from an Oregon State standpoint, it's fascinating to me because they talked about this in the Nerdcast. And if you haven't listened, go back and listen to that from this previous week. You don't have to listen twice like Mike Rooney does. Once might be all right for you. If you're not going to look, if you're not going to have to talk about it on ESPN television, you could probably just listen to it once.
That's right. That's right. Well said.
But Oregon State's in pretty good shape for, on paper, it looks like they're in pretty good shape for maybe to even be a top 8. The record is good. RPI is sitting at 6 as of today. But then you look under the hood a little bit, and it's kind of like that old Sesame Street game. Like, one of these things is not like the other. Like, they're 5-8 against quad 1 opponents, and that's not really power conference opponents for what that's worth. It's like, UC Irvine, which is a very good club. But they had 4 opportunities against Oregon and went 0 right? And they had some one-off wins early in the season in the tournaments they played in, but ultimately mostly took losses there as well, at least against the top teams. So if they're going to be a top 8, like this feels like a series they have to win.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to imagine unless I guess if they lose it, I'm not an RPI wizard enough to tell you one way or the other, but it feels like they're in pretty good shape to just host. But if they're going to be serious about a top 8, like this is a weekend that's really important, because it's their resume is largely RPI based, and good news for them is the committee typically, when it comes to top 8s and hosts, hews pretty closely to the RPI, but it is a resume that if you look underneath it is maybe not as strong as you might think, given that RPI, which is based on a lot of road games largely. And also, not for nothing, the comparison game doesn't work for them because they're playing as an independent, whereas I think in other leagues you can kind of use, kind of like in real estate, you can use comps to try to like create this like favorable comparison to what you want, how you want to be seen. They can't do that. And so I think that's a little bit of a disadvantage. And so it's a big weekend for them. And, it's not my last thing. They also played last weekend in Hawaii until Monday. They played 4 in Hawaii until Monday, came back to the mainland, and now we're going to Des Moines. Like that's a lot in a week's time. So like, you do wonder if there's just like a little bit of fatigue there. We'll see, but that's another thing I'm watching.
If you lived in Des Moines, that would be a tough trip. Yes. Like if you went from Des Moines to where you live to Hawaii and back, you'd be exhausted, let alone you live in Corvallis, Oregon. I will tell you, Joe, on Oregon State, like before the season, I thought they're really talented and they are going to be RPI darlings. The RPI, to your point, has been even better. I feel like they've left a lot of meat on the bone. Like they've left a lot of money on the table, and they still have this glowing RPI. And they've earned every bit of that. I texted someone who's seen Irvine and Oregon State, and I was both glad and sad at the response. The person basically said, Irvine, I love their first 5 hitters. They play great defense. They're super well coached. I'm worried if there's enough arm talent. Like it's just kind of like trickery on the mound. And then for Oregon State, who I was worried I was going to get a really bad response back, the response was like, that team's super dangerous, like very much smells like an Omaha team, like frontline talent everywhere. I think Oregon State has not played their best baseball yet, so I'm encouraged by that. I think for Iowa, one of the reasons why I'm so frustrated about the Iowa situation is I think they passed the eye test, and that frustrates me that the metrics are not backing that up. And again, like I get it. Iowa lost 3 out of 4 to Washington State, who's really struggled. Like that actually happened. They lost a midweek game to Western Illinois. That happened. But they also have won 8 of 9 Big Ten weekends. And the Big Ten is the 4th rated conference in the country. It's not hot garbage. And so my favorite part about Iowa is that their position player group is more players than prospects, but Gable Mitchell, their shortstop, is, like his first name is a famous last name, right? Dan Gable is his grandfather and is arguably one of the greatest coaches in the history of NCAA college athletics. And that kid runs their team, just like you think he would as a junior. Like they're not allowed to not play hard unless they want to get assaulted by Gable Mitchell. Like I'm kidding. I don't know that Gable Mitchell is wired. Like has ever hit one of his teammates. I'm probably certain he hasn't, but he's awesome that way. And then what I love about their pitching staff is that their 3 starters, their rotation, are their 3 lowest ERAs. Cade Obermueller is a son of a big leaguer. I think he will pitch in the big leagues. That's a real ace. That's a sidearm lefty throwing 95 miles an hour. Reese Buter and Aaron Savary are their other 2 starters. They both have ERAs under 3.4. All 3 of them have made 12 starts, so that's 36 for 36. So I'm wired to love Iowa's team because I love like just consistent rotations like that, and that's why you did a good job keeping me positive early on, Joe. The bottom line for Iowa is your next 6 games with the 2 Oregon schools. You control your own destiny. Go do your thing. Go be the team that Coach Rooney thinks you are, and it all takes care of itself.
I think it's 100% right. I think that's well said. I don't truly understand how they do it, but somehow Iowa's always old. Like it's just like they've got guys in this lineup that it's like, what is that guy still doing around? Like I just don't, but they do a great job. The old adage of getting old and staying old. One more thing on this, Runes. I looked up Oregon State's needs report RPI stuff. So top 8 is a narrow path. They've got 7 games left. They got to win them all according to the needs report to finish top 8. So they're going to drop regardless, at least according to this. To finish top 16, they have to win, looks like 4 of 7, which is obviously extremely doable, but also not a cakewalk, right? So even the hosting case is a little more tenuous than I would have guessed. So if they lose this series, which is totally on the table, it does put some pressure on them to, rounding out the season to do some work to make sure they get to play home baseball in Corvallis.
Yep. I love it. I actually would be cool with Oregon State hosting a regional, but then going on the road for a super regional. I think that would, them winning their first trip to Omaha since the national title in 2018 on the road, would be very apropos for this season. Before we go to your second star, Joe, I want to remind everybody, get your sub to D1 Baseball right now. Kendall has got a coupon, Omaha 30, gets you 30% off. Remember, if you do SEC Extra, you get ACC Extra for free. If you do ACC Extra, you get SEC Extra for free. When you think about our NCAA tournament, of the 64 teams, approximately 23 to 24 of them are going to be from those 2 leagues. I mean, if you know those 2 leagues, you got a huge head start. And just as Joe and I are talking, like you go to the page, I go to Iowa's page, I can hit lineup and see who started where. I can look up their stats in half a second. I can look at their schedule. I can look up their RPI. Joe and Mark have so many great things on the website every day. Mark had a great article the other day about, okay, the bubble teams in the SEC are A&M, Kentucky, I guess Florida technically, and the Mississippi State. I think I have that right. And he just laid it out. Like, here's who they're playing, and here's how safe or not safe they are. Bradley's doing the same thing. Bradley Smart's got this awesome stuff going on about, like, he's doing ELO, like, simulations to see what the bracket in the ACC tournament is going to look like. Again, Bradley, I want to say that Bradley Smart's a cyborg, but that's not fair to Bradley. He's smarter than a cyborg. But that's anyway, right. Yeah, so good stuff. So what is your second star series here in this category, Joe?
Let's go. I'm going to go to the Big 12. Let's go West Virginia at Kansas State. Another series on both ends. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, from the West Virginia standpoint, it's just that if they were to win this series, it would just immediately become West Virginia's best series win of the season. We talked about that a ton this season, both on this podcast and on the Nerdcast, just that the league schedule broke to where, West Virginia just didn't have a lot of opportunities against the best teams in the league. And, oh, by the way, the Big 12 doesn't, other than West Virginia, doesn't really have a consistent best team. I guess Arizona has kind of moved into that spot, but it's just been so topsy-turvy. So there's that. But then on the K-State standpoint, this feels like a little bit of a last stand for K-State. They're on the bubble at this point, and this is a great opportunity. It's the best opportunity they're going to have. They have the best team in the Big 12 coming to their place. And I've kind of been, speaking of like roller coasters, I've been riding one with Kansas State. I saw them early in the season in that series in Conway, Coastal Carolina, Washington, St. Joe's, what have you, and kind of thought, I don't know. I just don't see it. They lost so much star power after last year. I thought they'd be frisky. I think that's they've reached a nice kind of like baseline as a program where they're just going to be at a bare minimum frisky. And then they started playing great. And I was like, okay, clearly I've underestimated this team. Aaron wrote about them a couple times early in the season and had some really positive things to say about them. But now they've hit another skid and just frankly aren't playing that well. And I saw it up close and personal when I was in Kansas when they got swept in that series against their rivals there. But they got to get moving. They certainly can't afford to get swept here. But they got to protect their home field here. Else I fear that they are going to end up kind of on the wrong side of things, especially if like a Cincinnati continues to play well and makes a push. Like, I know the committee and Mark will tell you that, the leagues don't win bids, teams do. And I believe that for the most part. But I do think sometimes that can happen where teams end up just kind of swapping spots in the pecking order, and that ends up knocking the team that falls out of the field altogether. So just a big series all around for West Virginia to solidify hosting, for Kansas State to solidify its spot in the field.
Joe, Kansas State, like when they have blips or, when they struggle, like their reputation as their position player group is usually very formidable, but maybe they're a little light on the mound. When you saw them struggle against Kansas, was that kind of the deal?
Yeah, it was. I think they got a lot of good work early in the season from some guys where you just thought, like Michael Cavedo, for example, like I don't want to say soft tossing because it's not quite that, but it's just a pitchability guy. And Lincoln Sheffield, one of their other starting pitchers, it's kind of the same thing. And they have really one bullpen guy, James Guyette, that they really, really trust. And everyone else is kind of on a very short leash as to whether or not they trust them, right? So it's pretty thin margins on the mound for K-State to get it done. But yeah, their position player group they've got pop, they're dynamic, they're athletic. I think there's some real some future prospects on this team. I think that are going to be real exciting to watch the next few years. It's just going to be, can they do enough on the mound if they do get to a regional, can they do enough on the mound to actually get to the business end of it when it's all said and done?
Yep. I am pulling for a West Virginia regional because that place will be #lit. I mean, it's not their first rodeo. They hosted a regional in 2019, which was super fun, unless you were the umpire. And I heard Steve Saban's on Shotgun Spratling's podcast, and he said, like, if you want a season ticket for West Virginia baseball, you actually can't get one. You'd have to buy it they are sold out of season tickets. That's how much that program has progressed. They've got a really fun team. So that's interesting. Your first star in this section here, Joe.
Yeah, so I'm gonna use the Kendall Rogers rule and cheat a little bit here.
Love that,
and that's in part because I was gonna make the first star NC State, North Carolina, but we've already seen game 1 of that series, so I'll talk about that a little bit. That's the true number 1 star, but much to Aaron Fitt's chagrin, just because it felt like he was kind of, he was early kind of pointing out that, hey, NC State's making a move here, and they've actually got some pieces that suggest they could make another deep postseason run. And he looked like he was going to be right on. And then last week they just ran into, right now, the freight train that is Miami. Right. And so they fell, and it doesn't look like they're going to host and all that. But it just, tonight was a situation where, for all of the, early in the season, at least I did, kind of jumped off both the NC State and UNC bandwagons after they looked not great early on. And both have rebounded, obviously, but I think UNC just looks like the better team. It's one game. I don't want to get overheated about it, but I watched the first 5 or 6 innings or whatever it was before he jumped on here, and it was pretty comprehensive in UNC's favor. It's just the bullpen depth is incredible. The rotation's extremely strong as well, but I think what seemed like a weakness earlier this season for UNC has actually become a little bit of a strength, and that's that their lineup is what it might lack a little bit in having, a big time pop all over the place. Like it is a lineup full of guys who can really get out and run and really put the bat on the ball and can really make things happen. And you saw it early in the game today where it's like a little line drive into the corner for Kane Kepley, and the right fielder juggles it and bobbles it around, and Kane Kepley ends up on third base for a ball that the outfielder ostensibly was trying to cut off to make it a single, not a double. And it ends up being 3 bases because he just had to rush. So I think there was worry about, can UNC hit enough? And I get it, but when they're putting the bat on the ball, they're so difficult to defend because they're so athletic. Yeah, so that's one.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, I'm with you. I think I've even been I publicly apologized to LA Day Event because I'm with you. Like when they lost 5 in a row in week 2, I just completely packed up and left, sold my house, sold all of my shares. But they, I don't know. NC State feels like a good team. They don't feel like and their position player group is too new. Like I don't know those players. It just feels. So anyway, and North Carolina, to your point, is really coming on. Who's your second one, Joe? I'm curious if it's the same one as me.
So I've got Louisville and Georgia Tech. I'm extremely fascinated by. It feels like a series between two teams that are both need it but for different reasons, right? Like Louisville's in a situation where if they lose this series, and especially if they get swept, which I wouldn't predict, Georgia Tech's having trouble. Georgia Tech is the way they're built is going to be a team that is going to struggle to sweep teams sometimes. But if that happens for Louisville, like suddenly they go from a team that I think a few weeks ago on the Nerdcast, they were talking about look out for Louisville as a dark horse. I mean, if they get swept here, they could fall under 500 in ACC play. And if they win it, they'll be 12 and hang on. Joe is not good at math. If they win it, if they just lose a series, they'll be 14 and 13. There we go. And so my point is, like, their RPI is in good shape, but they're not so comfortable that they can really just kind of mess around right here. So there's that. And then for Georgia Tech, I mean, they built up such a cushion early in the season with the strong start that they're in pretty good shape as far as I don't think they have to worry about missing the postseason or anything, but I do think there is a little bit of a concern about limping into the postseason, and a little bit of the creeping in of, oh, actually, is this the same Georgia Tech team that it has been? Like I was convinced earlier this season that, oh, this is a different Georgia Tech team. And I still stand by that to some degree. I do think the pitching is just flatly better. But there has been enough of a backslide now where I'm starting to get a little bit skittish about it. And I'm not quite so convicted in that. And if I'm feeling that way, I have to imagine there's some element in that locker room of stuff like that of, oh boy, is this just the same thing it's always been? We're going to be a 2 in a regional that's going to win a game, and then we're going to lose in a regional final. And that's just kind of what it is. Obviously you can't determine that in the regular season, but winning this series, I think would be huge for just that team internally to be able to right the ship a little bit.
Yeah, Georgia Tech and Louisville are two fascinating teams. Like I could easily see those two teams winning a regional, mostly because their offense just goes off. Like I think the best version of those two offenses can just like come through a regional like a storm. I actually I'm curious at Miami at Virginia because it would be just like Virginia to go win this series and maybe even sweep Miami. And one thing I have not done a good job of, Joe, and I need to ask Bradley this, and I want to ask some people around the program. I've just kind of like walked away from Virginia. I need to sit down and say to somebody, what happened? Like, because Virginia could still they're not done. Like they could still, I fully anticipate Virginia forcing us to think about them on Selection Monday. But I just want to know what happened. Like, what is it? Is it pitching? It feels too simple. It feels like the answer is a little bit complex. And I'm curious to hear. And look at Kane's Cat Heat 305 in the chat. I see you.
Yeah, our old friend Kane's Cats Heat 305. Good luck to the Ice Cats this playoffs, Mr. 305. I wonder if some of what has afflicted Virginia, Runes, and this is just my total off the cuff, but I was thinking about it when you were talking about NC State's position player group being too new and you just don't know enough about them. I wonder if there's something to the offensive environment being different this year that has made it harder for an offense like Virginia. Now, they were not totally home run dependent as an offense the last couple of years, but they were very offense forward. And is a situation where you're in kind of this offensive environment where the ball's just not carrying this season, is that enough to where what you thought your bread and butter was going to be is not, and then you're just not well-rounded enough offensively to make up for it. Maybe that's part of it there, because the offensive environment is something I've been thinking a lot about that I don't feel like is being talked about enough. And frankly, I'll point the finger at myself. I have not asked around enough, to be honest with you, but the numbers are the numbers. Like the ball is just not carrying like it has the last couple of years.
Yep, 100%. By the way, so if you're listening to this as a podcast, one of our good friends in the chat, his handle is Kane's Cats Heat 305. So he was very good about owning that he thought Miami was going. It's the old two things can be true at the same time. he was very good about owning up that he took UConn a little bit lightly. And by the way, Miami is one of the big resume points for UConn right now, besides the fact that they've won 17 out of 18 games, but after a terribly slow start. But Canes Cats Heat 305 was also dead on. Miami's excellent. Like, that's an awesome team. They're
right.
very dangerous right now. So
he was right.
He was right. He was right. Yes. Joe, let me just rattle off a couple more series. So Xavier's at Creighton. The Big East looks like a multi-bid league again, so every series is really interesting. Kennesaw State is lurking in the bubble picture. They're at DBU. Bowling Green and Notre Dame have a really cool RPI-motivated series where they're going to play 2 games at Notre Dame, 1 game at Bowling Green. I see Coach Stifler, Notre Dame, one of the hottest teams in the country. Houston Christian at Lamar. The Southland just been fun. I want to mention them every week. Louisiana's going to USM. That's a big series for USM that could sneak into the hosting picture. Sac State is going to Utah Valley. And one of those 2 teams, I think, is going to win the WAC regular season title. Boy, that'd be a cool rebound for Sac State after Grand Canyon's kind of dominated that deal. And then you have UTSA's going to East Carolina, Joe, and you have one of the games, right?
I do, yeah. I'll be on the ESPN Plus call Friday night for the game between UTSA and ECU. Should be a lot of fun. UTSA, by the way, like, I thought the guys in the Nerdcast, basically what Runes and I are doing here is just running like an alternate podcast to the Nerdcast where you just take jabs at things they said, apparently. But I thought they were a little too dismissive of UTSA as a possible host. They're up to 20 in RPI now. ECU is not as good as they've been, but the RPI is still fine. You know, it's not great, but it's fine. If they win this, UTSA does as a road series, the RPI might go up. So I think they're going to have to grapple with, a UTSA team that might, they've already clinched the American. They'll win it outright if they win Friday. So they're going to win the league by 5 or 6 games. And, ECU's hosted with resumes like that before. Now, it's not the same thing. I get it. Like, ECU tends to also pick off a lot of ACC teams midweek. UTSA has not done something similar, but anyway, just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. 2 questions in the chat and then we'll wrap. So Rich Deek says, any thoughts on Pitt at Wake, especially after Pitt winning over West Virginia? And, I think Pitt is very dangerous right now. Mike Bell him and his staff do as good of a coaching job. I think Pitt is an incredibly difficult baseball job, and they have just been consistently competitive. And it's been tough getting over the hump. Judge Smales is in here, by the way, Caddyshack, all-time great movie. He says, what are the odds that Paul Maneri is back at South Carolina next year? I'm not going to comment on that as much as to say in the corner of my office here, I'm watching Auburn and South Carolina. Auburn is up 16-1 in the 5th inning. And I just find the whole South Carolina thing heartbreaking because I think the world of Paul Maneri. Paul Maneri is, and I know I'm a coach apologist, but Paul Maneri is literally a Hall of Fame coach in college baseball. He won a national title at LSU. He took Notre Dame to Omaha in addition to that. He coached at the Air Force Academy. His dad was a Hall of Famer. I love Paul Maneri. And I love Ray Tanner. Ray Tanner was one of my heroes. And the South Carolina program to me is very akin to Mississippi State, where like these people, it used to be at South Carolina that they talked about college baseball in the fall and the winter and the spring, unlike a lot of SEC programs. And now, all due respect to Dawn Staley, who's, kind of changed what kind of school that is. And like a lot of things have changed at South Carolina. But I think college, to use the cliche, I don't want to live in a college baseball world where, Paul Maneri and Ray Tanner are getting their names dragged through the mud, and South Carolina is like having a historically bad season. I think South Carolina can turn things around quickly. I hope Paul Maneri gets a chance to execute that, but it's just a bummer, man. Man, it just stinks to see South Carolina struggling like this.
Yeah, I'll go one step further, Runes, because I understand the kind of unease about it, but I'll go one step further and say whether or not Paul is back for a second season, it's going to take everyone at South Carolina sitting down this offseason, or not even this offseason, because you don't have time. Like the minute the season ends, everybody's got to sit down and be like, we got to have a plan here. Like the status quo is not okay. And I don't know exactly what that means. Is it, hey, if we're going to be for real about this, like we're going to need NIL money, because I tell you who does have it, and it's Tennessee and LSU and Texas A&M, and choose your other SEC team that is in the place that South Carolina thinks it should be and can be. But the status quo, they can't just roll into next year, especially, oh, by the way, you'll be losing Ethan Petrie, you'll be losing Kennedy Jones. You'll lose Dylan Eskew. Eli Jerzenbeck is probably not going to be there after this year. He's injured, but he could be a guy. Like, I don't think he's going to be there next year. So like it's not like they're just going to be able to run it back with a group of players that was here. They're going to have to make drastic changes. And so, no matter who's in the dugout, it can't just be, all right, let's get them next time and dust ourselves off. Like, that's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Joe. Like Paul Mainieri, like self-admittedly, is not a long-term solution, right? Like his intention is not to be at South Carolina for the next 5 to 10 years. But I do think like the coach after Paul is going to be your fourth coach since Ray Tanner, and in theory, all 3 of those tenures will have ended not necessarily by choice. So like I'm with you. Like they need a strategic plan, like just a big time look at the infrastructure of the program, because it's like the conclusion is not for me that South Carolina is just the worst school ever at hiring baseball coaches. That's not why we're here. There are other reasons, and they have to solve for all of those things in a league where, you talk about no mercy. Like I'm very uncomfortable with the SEC getting 14 bids if it happens that way. But all that said, like I'm down in Starkville last weekend, and I'm like, okay, like it's an instant reminder why the league's so good. It is a big league atmosphere every weekend.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and you're never going to exist in the SEC on what you've done. Like that, right. Those days are gone. Like you kind of used to be, I don't want to totally, but largely used to kind of be able to do that. You could kind of just coast along on who you were and, hey, okay, we have a couple of years where we're just not as good, but we'll bounce back. Like, can't do that anymore. Like every year you have to, as the coaching cliche goes, you have to re-earn it pretty much every year in the SEC, because all the big boys are gonna raid the transfer portal and bring in a bunch of dudes, and you got to keep up. And South Carolina, to put a fine point on it, like South Carolina has just not done that. Like period, end of story. They're just not keeping up with the people, the programs that they want to be associated with. They're not serious about actually doing it. At least they've not done that so far. That could change overnight, but they've not. And that's why they are where they are. It's not, maybe Paul is just not cut for it this time around. That could be true, but I don't think that's the biggest factor. I think having a different coach in the dugout might have led to a few more wins, maybe, but I don't think it fundamentally changes what this South Carolina team is and was when we looked at it before the season.
Yep. Yeah. You're with you, Joe. Your coach next year, whether that's Paul or someone else, you have to lock arms with that person and change things, because the recruits that you need, the players that you need, they were 5 years old when you won your last national title. Like to your point about the past, like that is long gone. So it's going to be fascinating. I mean, what a great, incredible facility, incredible fan base, incredible area, incredible institution. Like there's so much going for it, but there's work to be done. That's it, everybody. This was great. Super fun. Coach Healy, always a pleasure. Good luck in your game with East Carolina and UTSA. People, you're probably listening to this on Friday or Saturday. Tune into Joe's Weekend Waypoints this weekend on YouTube. That is fantastic. It's a must listen every morning. And then when you guys wake up next week, Tuesday will be a week from conference tournament starts. Monday will be 2 weeks from Selection Monday. I'm telling you, it is go time. Like it is all caps go time. So that is it. Everybody have a great weekend, and we will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.